You sat in the waiting room, legs still, eyes on the floor. You weren't nervous. You'd been to dozens of checkups before. But something about this one felt different. Your doctor stepped in, kind voice, gentle hands, but his words hit harder than you expected. You're doing fine, but I need to tell you something. You'd be surprised how many people don't make it past 80, not because of disease, but because of slow habits that kill their strength before their time. You blinked. He continued. It's not always what you think. It's not just genetics or a fall. It's usually what they stop doing, years before anyone notices. And that sentence stayed with you. You walked home slower that day, not because you were tired, but because your mind was full. What am I no longer doing that might be quietly shortening my life? You opened the door, kicked off your shoes, sat down in your usual chair. Everything was the same, but now it felt different. You looked around your living room, neat, quiet, still, and for the first time, you realized how many days had passed without interruption. No visitors, no errands, no calls you had to return. And right there, the truth hit you. 1. The first reason many don't live past 80 is they begin living without movement. Not just exercise. Movement. The kind that sneaks into your day without effort. Walking to the corner store, rearranging a drawer, taking the stairs, bending to pick up what you dropped, stretching without being told to. That kind of motion fades, not with injury, but with silence. Until one day, your muscles don't hurt, because they've gone quiet. And when they go quiet for too long, they stop coming back. You stood up from your chair, felt your knees, your back, your balance. You weren't in pain, but you were slow, stiffer than usual, and you knew this didn't start today. You wrote in your notebook, stillness shortens life. Movement is what tells the body, we still need you. You walked around the room, not far, not fast, but with intention, because you realized something. Your legs don't weaken all at once. They weaken the day you stop asking them to carry you. If this story stirred something in you, if you've ever caught yourself sitting more than you stand, please consider subscribing. Because here, we don't just talk about aging, we talk about how to keep moving forward so you don't stop before your time. Later in the video, you'll uncover the second reason so many never see past 80. Not because their heart gave out, but because they forgot what it was beating for. You moved more today. Not much, but enough to feel the difference. You stood longer at the sink, took the stairs instead of the elevator, picked up the blanket you usually leave on the floor, and when you sat down, you felt a flicker of something you hadn't in a while. Control. Not over time, but over how you met it. And just as you reached for your notebook again, your mind went to something else. Something heavier than stillness. Something quieter than pain. You'd been alone a lot lately. You didn't mind, at first. You told yourself it was rest, freedom, less noise. But slowly, the silence stopped feeling restful. It started to feel like absence. No knock at the door. No, how are you on the phone? No reason to change clothes some days. And you realized your body wasn't the only thing growing quieter. Your sense of mattering was fading too. You picked up the pen and wrote the second truth. 2. People don't live past 80 when they start believing they're no longer needed. And this one, it doesn't show up on scans. There's no prescription for it. But it's real. You've seen it in others. How the light fades in their voice when no one asks them for anything. When their days lose shape. When they start saying, it's fine, instead of, I'll try. Your doctor called it emotional frailty. Not sadness, not grief. Something deeper. The body weakens, when the heart feels unused, the immune system drops, the appetite dulls, the muscles don't recover, because deep down, your cells are listening, and when you stop giving them a reason to hold on, they quietly let go. You put the pen down, stared at the ceiling, and thought of one person you hadn't called in a while, not because you forgot, but because you didn't want to be a burden. And then the real question surfaced. What if I'm not a burden? What if I'm still a connection someone's waiting for? You stood up, picked up the phone, dialed a number you still knew by heart. They answered, surprised, happy, and so were you. You returned to the notebook and added, we live longer when we remember we still matter, and when we let other people remind us. If this story made you think of someone you've lost touch with, or reminded you that you still have something to offer, please consider subscribing. Because here, we don't just share tips to stay alive, we remind you what's worth living for. Later in the video, you'll uncover the third warning, the habit that looks like self-care, but slowly steals your stamina, balance, and joy before anyone notices. You've always been told to rest. When you're tired, when you've worked hard, when your joints ache after too much walking. And you listened. You earned your rest. After a life of doing, you finally had time to sit, to breathe, to be still. But somewhere along the way, that stillness stopped feeling like recovery. It started feeling like retreat. You looked around one afternoon and noticed it. The television still on from hours ago. Your cup of tea, cold. A pile of books you told yourself you'd get to. And your legs. They hadn't moved more than a few feet all day. And yet, you were still tired. Not physically, but somewhere deeper. You were resting, but somehow you were still fading. You reached for your notebook, not to write anything profound, just to sit up, to hold a pen, to remind yourself you were still capable of motion. And what you wrote surprised you. 3. Many people don't live past 80 because they confuse rest with withdrawal. It's subtle. It doesn't look dangerous, but it is. Because when the days start blending, when chairs become anchors instead of pauses, when silence replaces music and screens replace conversations, you're no longer resting. You're rehearsing disappearance. Your doctor once said, true rest is what prepares the body to move again. If it's not doing that, it's not rest, it's surrender. And the danger? You rarely notice when it crosses that line. You think, I deserve to take it easy. I've done enough for today. I don't need to go out unless I have to. And slowly, the body starts believing you. Muscles stop recharging. Balance fades. Sleep becomes shallow. Your energy shrinks. Because you didn't stop moving to heal. You stopped moving to hide. You stood up then. Didn't rush. Didn't stretch. Just stood. And listened to your legs, your back, your heart. They didn't complain. They were grateful. You walked to the window, opened it, let fresh air in, then returned to your notebook and added, real rest leaves you ready to live again. False rest makes life smaller than it has to be. You don't have to run, or lift weights, or join a class. You just have to move on purpose. Walk to your mailbox, fold a blanket, turn the page, stand during commercials, stretch while the kettle boils. It's not exercise, it's continuation. And continuation is how people live to 90, with their dignity still intact. If this story reminded you to question how you're spending your stillness, if it helped you draw the line between true rest and quiet surrender, please consider subscribing. Because here, we don't just share what's killing people. We help you stay alive in ways that still feel like life. Later in the video, you'll discover the fourth warning, one that has nothing to do with the body and everything to do with what happens when older adults stop expressing themselves. You didn't notice how quiet you'd become. It wasn't on purpose. You just stopped chiming in, stopped offering advice, stopped calling first. At family dinners, you smiled, nodded, but rarely added much. When friends asked how you were, you answered with fine, and left it at that. You weren't sad, you weren't bitter, but you were slowly fading from the conversation. And then you read something that stopped you cold. It said, older adults who stop expressing themselves have a 35% higher chance of cognitive decline. Not because their minds go first, but because their voices go silent, and the body follows. You opened your notebook again, took a deep breath, and wrote the fourth reason so many don't make it past 80. 4. They stop speaking, and with that, they stop being known. You let the words sit on the page, because it was more than just sound. It was identity. You used to tell stories, make jokes, write cards, sing along to the radio without thinking. But over time, you didn't feel as needed, didn't want to take up space. So you said less, and the less you said, the more the world stopped asking. But now you understood something deeper. The human body thrives on expression. When you speak, your lungs stretch, your facial muscles fire, your brain lights up in patterns that preserve memory. And when you don't speak, those systems go unused. They weaken, just like muscles in stillness. You stood in front of the mirror, said your name out loud, then repeated it, stronger. You picked up the phone, called an old friend, and instead of asking how they were, you shared how you were. Not to complain, but to be real, because silence is peaceful until it becomes erasure. You returned to your notebook and wrote, if I don't speak, I disappear. I have to use my voice to stay alive in my own story. Then you did something you hadn't in a while. You sang, just one verse from an old song, off key, off tempo. But it didn't matter, because for that 1 minute, your breath, your body, and your memory were all working together. And that's what health really is. If this story reminded you to speak up, to tell your truth, even in small ways, please consider subscribing. Because here, we don't just talk about staying alive. We talk about staying heard in a world that moves too fast to ask. Later in the video, you'll uncover the final warning. The quiet habit that pretends to be rest, but may actually be the last thread holding you back from reaching your fullest years. You used to think that getting older meant doing less. Less movement, less speaking, less involvement, less need to be heard or seen. But now, after everything you've written, everything you've remembered, everything you've felt in your own body, you know better. It's not less that keeps you alive. It's presence. And presence doesn't come from big goals. It comes from the way you treat your ordinary hours, with intention. You don't need to run marathons. You don't need to be the loudest in the room. You don't need a calendar full of obligations. You just need to keep showing up. In motion, in conversation, in thought, in spirit. Because people don't stop living after 80 because their time runs out. They stop living because they quietly stop participating in it. But you've made a different choice. You've chosen to move, to express, to stay connected, to keep telling your story, even when the room goes silent. And that makes all the difference. You close the notebook, place it beside your chair, stand up, not fast, not flawlessly, but fully present, and you whisper, I'm still here, and I intend to stay. If this story helped you feel less invisible, more alive, or reminded you that your life is still yours, please consider subscribing. Because here, we don't just count years, we make sure the years you have still belong to you.